So I'm Mike Jones. I'm the retired Texas cop.
Yep, I'm Pete Gillette. I'm the retired Australian cop from New South Wales. Yeah, I thought we'd tell some funny stories today about traffic stops. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think I think it should be funny. It's
Yeah,
funny to us. You
yeah,
know,
that's right.
it might necessarily been funny to the person we had pulled over, but
It's always funny later on.
it is. It is.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll kick off with one. Now, in Australia or in New South Wales, there's only two kind of accidents or car crashes: minor and major. And what makes a motor vehicle crash major is five different conditions. And one of them is if you need a tow truck, righto? So anyway, this particular story, I was on a training day and me and this bunch of coppers were walking from the station down to the training room to listen to these lectures. And lo and behold, in front of us, a Pantech truck. Do you know what a Pantech means?
No.
Oh, it means a small truck you might do deliveries in. And this small Pantech truck goes around to roundabout and falls on its side. And so, what are we going to do? We're on a
You're gonna need a
training
tow
day.
truck.
We don't want to have to involve ourselves in a crash like that. So, fortunately, there was enough of us. We just got underneath it and just picked it up and put it back on its wheels.
No accident.
No action. Uh,
Yeah.
It looked good from the public point of view, saved us a whole lot of work, saved the driver from getting a negligent driving ticket, which is probably about $300. So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, that was a pretty good result. That's my first
Yeah.
story.
As police officers, man, we used to do it just seems like there's a similarity there too, because it never failed right at closing, right at the time to get off work, you
Yeah,
would end up somebody would do something right in front of
yeah,
you,
yeah,
and you got to think to yourself, now if I pull this guy over or gal over
yeah,
for this infraction, because I don't know how it was in Australia, but we had you know we had the leeway whether we pulled somebody over or we didn't,
yeah,
whether we wrote a ticket or we didn't,
yeah, yeah,
um, and so if somebody did an infraction in front of you and you were 15 minutes from headed back to the station to get off work,
yeah.
and that person had a warrant out of, an
Oh,
extraditional warrant,
hmm,
you're going to be tied up for 4 hours doing
yeah,
paperwork, and
yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of times, you would like you'd be if you're riding double, you'd say, "Hey, you'd ask your partner, did you see that?" And he's like, "No, I didn't see anything." you know, like, okay, let's go to the station, go home. That person could have just robbed a bank, but it's 15 minutes before we go home.
Yeah, yeah,
You get
exactly.
them another day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One day, same sort of thing. We came across a car accident. Two cars had banged into each other, and the offending driver, he was all upset, and he wanted to get a tow truck there, and because he thought he needed a tow truck because the mud guard, you call it a fender, don't you?
It depends. I mean, we call them fenders, but y'all call them mud guards.
Yeah, mud guard. Yeah.
See, a
Yeah.
mud guard for us would be like a piece of rubber hanging off the back of a bumper or something,
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Well, actually, here they call it a mud guard.
Okay.
Which is where where the wheel is. Anyway, this bloke, he wanted a tow truck because the mud guard had pushed in on his tyre. And I said to him, mate, if you want a tow truck, I can tell you, you're going to get a ticket, $350 ticket for negligent driving. Said, get a crowbar or something like that and just reef the mud guard off the
Get
tyre,
it off that tire.
and you're right. So he was more than happy with that. So
Yeah, some people can talk themselves into a ticket,
yeah. Yeah,
you
they
know.
got all upset and, want to tow.
Yeah.
You don't.
I told you before, a lot of times, most of the time, I didn't write any tickets, but there was times that a person could talk themselves into ticket. They would just be so adamant, that they didn't do something, and you're like, well, I'm not writing you a ticket anyway. But I saw this infraction, and I
Mm,
just wanted to pull you over, get compliance, and send you on your way. Oh no, they'll just argue up and down. I didn't do this or that,
yeah.
and then you end up having to, write a ticket, because it's getting out of hand now, and you don't want to go tit for tat with this person, but and and you even tell them sometimes, look, I'm not even going to write you a ticket. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Oh yeah, I didn't do it. All right. I mean,
Uh,
we'll let the judge sort it out, because that's what happens with our tickets. We write a ticket. It
mm,
doesn't mean that that person is guilty of
mm,
anything. It just
mm,
means that the
mm,
officer's saying that he saw this or whatever.
mm.
Well, a judge looks at it a whole different way. If you put on the ticket, it was 1 o'clock, but yet your body cam or your car camera shows that it was at noon, he dismisses the ticket because now you wrote one thing, but it was not. So you know, the, and it never bothered me. That money doesn't go to my pocket anyway.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And yeah. So but people they can talk themselves into a ticket. It reminds me of a funny story. So I was patrolling. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I was headed back towards our town. And it was probably another 10 miles of just a rural 2-lane road.
Right.
And I'm headed back to town, and I see these headlights coming my way. My radar. Did y'all have
Oh, no,
radar in your cars?
no, not in
So
Shanghai.
we had radar,
No, no, we didn't have
and
that.
that radar notified you, of what was uncommon
Mm-hmm.
in the frequency that of the noise that you would hear. So I mean, it would just be a steady hum if it was, pretty close to what your speed is.
Right, okay.
It would be a high pitch, real quick,
Mm,
high pitch noise if it was somebody that was coming that was 20 or 30 miles over what you were doing. You,
mm.
you follow me?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and it grabs your attention, and then you look at the radar readout, and then you can see what your speed is, and you can see what their speed is, and it's real accurate,
Mm,
and it's accurate, depending on obviously the terrain, but it could be accurate up to for me maybe a mile and a half. So I
wow.
mean,
Oh,
yeah, and he was the only headlights out there, so it's not like I
yeah.
got to now figure out who's the fastest one. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Um, I was just patrolling, listening to the radio, and just biding my time, making sure everything's going all right. Nobody out there, and I see these pair of headlights coming, and I'm like, man, that looks like that car is flying, and the radar's not doing anything. And
mm.
then all of a sudden, that high pitched spike, and it was 104 miles an hour, and I don't know what that is
Wow.
in kilometers, but it's way up there.
160.
So that's what this guy was doing,
Mm,
and so I have to wait till he passes me so I can turn around, do a U-turn, right?
mm,
And you know how we're trained to do that.
mm.
So because I need to get behind him, I don't want to do U-turn in front of him. I mean, if a smart guy would do a U-turn behind me and go the other way, you know what I'm saying?
Mm,
So I do U-turn, and he sees me, and I hit the lights, and I
mm,
don't have to hit the siren because I can see his brake lights. He realizes it's
mm,
police, and he pulls over the side of the road, and I pull up on him, and it's just a normal traffic stop for me. Although we consider it reckless driving now because it's 25 miles over the speed limit, and now it's an arrestable offense if we wanted to pursue it that way.
mm.
But normally 11 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night, there's going to be some alcohol involved in it as
Oh,
well.
yep.
And so I
Mm,
was thinking, this is going to be terrible for me. I'm going to be out of commission for 4 or 5 hours doing, a DWI paperwork.
mm.
Anyway, I go up there, and I have to knock on his window. He didn't even roll the window down. So
Wow.
after I knocked, he did, and I'm thinking, man, I would have had that window rolled down, because he knows he's speeding.
Yeah.
So he was coming from, we had drag races down the road, and he was coming from those drag races. It was sanctioned, drag races, and he was all amped up, and he was in a fast car. I can't remember what kind of car it was now, but
Yeah.
I knocked on his window, and he rolled the window down, and I told him who I was and what reason why I pulled him over, and tell him I caught you doing, whatever it was, 100. It was 100 and something miles an hour in at the time it was 55 miles an hour is his own. So it was way up there.
Mm.
And I said, we're trained to say, is there a reason for your emergency, right? And you'll hear a bunch of them. Yeah, I had to go to the bathroom, or well, you just passed the gas station that had a bathroom, you
Mm.
know. But this guy's. So I asked him. I said, is there a reason for your emergency, sir? He goes, yeah. He said, my wife's fixing to have a baby, and she was next to him, and she slaps him, and she says, no, I'm not. He said, you're fixing to be. Or no, he said, my wife's pregnant. That's what he said. And she slapped him and said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "You're fixing to be." He was trying
Uh,
to get home to have relations with his wife. I'll let him go.
oh, you're very generous, Mike. Yeah, that's pretty generous.
Yeah. Hey, but I had that story for the next 20 years,
That's right. Imagine him telling that story. He'd been telling that story as well.
He might have used that same story for 10 other
Could have
police
done.
officers.
He could have done. Yeah. Yeah. Then he ran into Mike. Um,
Exactly.
we have legislation here. I think it's Australia wide, where we can pull over any car for called a random breath test. Right, you
Oh,
pull a
okay.
car over, and there's every police vehicle in Australia probably carries one. And anyway, they've got to talk into it. They've got to count to 10, and they just talk into it, and the machine is sucking air in, and if there's alcohol on the breath, it tells you, and then you put a tube in it, and then they blow into the tube. Right, that's very very common here. Almost everyone knows about it. Random breath testing. So I used to make a habit of pulling over 10 cars every shift we just abbreviate it to RBT. So anyway, pulled this car over. It's a bunch of young girls who are heading out for a party, and one of them was the designated driver. Do you have that idea in the United
Yeah,
States?
yeah.
Yeah. So one of them's this girl is the designated driver, and she's blonde. She's a young blonde girl, and they're all in a good mood. They're all in good humour. And so I said, you've been pulled over for an RBT, and I put the machine in front of her and say, count to 10. She does this. I said out
Silently.
loud. And all the other girls started laughing. And I said, and you've got her driving you around. You just
That's
happen to
somebody's
follow.
daughter.
Funny. Anyway, then she
Yeah.
in out loud. Uh,
I it- you can find humor in just about any traffic stop. Most of the time. I mean, sometimes there's no humor in it, and it's a beat down, and um, you know, I always in my mind, if somebody did something and I caught it was that it was an infraction of the law in some way or form, I would make my mind up before I ever got out of my car.
mm,
Is this going to result in a ticket, or is this not going to result in a ticket?
mm,
And I had a personal uh, policy that I followed, that if I wasn't going to write them a ticket, then I could chew them out to get, hey, well, you need to slow down, especially if they were young,
mm.
do the kind of like the dad slash
Yeah,
police officer,
yeah.
butt chewing. But I wouldn't do that and write them a ticket,
Oh no, that's double jeopardy.
Yeah, it's just not cool, you
No,
know.
not no.
So, but if I was going to write them a ticket, I would just say, hey, you can't be doing this, such and such. Thank you for the time. Go see you got 10 days to contact the court and take care of this.
Mm,
But if they were kids, here it's 21 is the drinking, legal drinking age.
yeah.
If you're under the age of 21, we don't even have to breathalyze you. All we have to do is smell alcohol,
Mm,
and now you're driving,
mm,
you know, now you can get them for DWI. And
mm,
that could run a kid for a long time,
yeah.
way up into adulthood.
Mm,
And so me and probably 90% of the police officers I knew, we would just call the parents. Hey, you need to come down here, and we let the parents take care of it. We
mm,
would chew on the parents a little bit,
yeah.
but
Mm,
I don't know if they thought we were serious. We act like we were serious, but
mm,
I mean, as a parent, you can't really keep your kid from doing what a kid's going to do.
mm,
You hope they won't,
mm, mm.
but they get with a bunch of other buddies and they start giggling and start drinking and they don't think about dad at the time.
No.
So that's what we would do, as well as like speeding tickets or running a stop sign or something like that. If we write a ticket to that kid for running a stoplight, for instance, nine times out of ten, that kid's not paying for the insurance. His parents
Yeah.
are.
Mm,
They're probably on the parents' policy, and the
mm,
parents' policy is now going to go up.
mm,
And the kid ain't paying for it anyway. So,
mm,
as long as we could get through to them, well, as much as we thought we were getting through to them,
mm,
we wouldn't write them a ticket, because of that, that ancillary of what would happen to, down the road to these
mm,
kids. So, but a funny story that we were talking about is we would call everything into the dispatcher. Did y'all do, if we pulled somebody over, we would take their license, we would call it into the dispatch. Is that how y'all did it too?
no, no.
You ran it in the car?
I used to actually carry a pen in my pocket. There was actually a pen, but it was also a recording device, like
Uh-huh.
well, it was an audio recording device. And I would just hit whenever because I worked alone most of the time,
Hmm.
and I would just hit the button, and I would just say, "I'm pulling over Alpha Bravo Charlie 123 on Smith Street," just in case something happened to him. And my
Yeah.
colleagues knew, oh, Pete carries that pen, and they would know.
Y'all didn't have body cams at the
No,
time?
no,
Yeah.
no,
Do
no.
they have them now?
Yeah, they'd have them now. Yeah, but not
Yeah.
then. No.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we would call in, if we pull somebody over before we got out of the car, we would call it into dispatch. So
Mm,
not only would dispatch know, but everybody that's on that same net
mm,
would know and you would, because we worked solo. Sounds like you work solo too.
mm,
But when you hear one of your other guys pull over somebody and it's 2 o'clock in the morning,
mm,
you kind of start drifting his direction,
mm,
and you just kind of and you kind of listen to the radio traffic.
mm,
But we would call the dispatch and we would have to call the name, once we get the license. Let me stop. So we'd pull it over, call in dispatch. This is color of the car,
mm,
what kind of car, make, how many occupants if we could see. And then they would acknowledge that. And then we'd get out of the car and then we'd go up and we'd make contact with the driver.
mm,
And we'd ask the driver for the driver's license and proof of insurance. And then we go back to the car
mm,
and we would call in that driver's license number or the name and date of birth,
mm,
and the dispatcher would run it and all that. So if it was a name like Bob Smith, we would call it in and say, "Hey, could you check one? Name is Bob Smith," and we'd say common spelling,
mm,
instead of B-O-B or Bravo Ocean, we would just say common spelling. Well, I pulled over this guy. He's from like Malaysia, and
mm,
he had a name that was that long. And I can't remember the name now, but it was something I couldn't pronounce.
mm.
But I tried to, and his first name was just as long. It was just crazy name,
Yeah.
and I called it in. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I said, "Yeah, I need you to check this." And I went name, and I said in common spelling, and there was silence on the radio. And I was, man, I was just laughing in the car. Of course, the guy that was driving, I had pulled over. He had no clue what I was doing. I was just doing police work back there in the back, But you could hear everybody keying up on the mic. That was their way of saying they were laughing. It was some.
It's
I
funny.
think his last name had like 26 letters to it. It was the craziest thing, you
Yeah.
know.
We had a
So
policeman, one of the places I worked at. He had a really strange surname. I think it might have been Polish. And it
yeah,
was if anyone was going to make a complaint about one of us, you would have to give your name and your rank. Anyway, he would say his name. I'm not going to say what it is. I don't even know if I can remember, but he would say normal
right.
spelling.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, so y'all
and,
kind of
I
do the
mean,
same thing.
seriously, you know what an eye chart is? When you have a
Yeah.
voice check, it looked like an eye chart. His name was an eye chart.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I had too. I pulled over a girl whose name, I remember this. Her name was Anita Bush.
Yeah.
Now we can call in just the ID number, but that wouldn't have been as funny as just calling over, telling dispatch you want to check Anita Bush.
Uh,
I guess her parents had a sense of humor.
we, I know a couple of police I know, they were highway patrolmen, and they pulled over a car in the middle of the night, and the driver didn't have his driver's license on him, and so and that's an offence. You can get an infringement notice
Yeah.
for not having that. Anyway, so they go, well, what's your name, mate? And he gave a name, and now I'm not going to say the name, but it was a very common name. And they must have had his name and date of birth. Went back to the patrol car, did a check over the radio, and came back no find, which means he's not there. Very, very unusual. And I went back to the car and I said, mate, there's no find, like meaning you're telling us lies. He then disclosed who he was, and it was this very senior ranking member. He might have had something to do with the Royal Commission. Don't know about that. And that's who it was. And they said, right, thank you, sir. Good night, sir. On your way.
Yeah, man. I never personally pulled over anybody. I had a friend who ended up becoming the sheriff in this county. He pulled over an activist from out of New York who I don't even know why that he was in Texas. He was doing some kind of activist, just a troublemaker. And he didn't have a good reputation in Texas. I don't know if he had a good reputation in New York, but him and so he was being driven by a driver in a limousine, and this guy I know pulled him over, and the limousine driver didn't have it, or I think his limousine driver had an arrest warrant, so they arrested the limousine driver out on the highway on the interstate, and he can release that car to a licensed driver. The only other person in that car was this activist, right? And this activist didn't have a driver's license. So so, and this is Texas. This is wide open spaces. And so they called a tow truck for the limousine because there was nobody, with a driver's license to drive the limousine. And they put this activist on foot. So, all right, you're free to go. You're just not going in that limousine. And it was in the middle of the night. I forget the whole story, but they put him and it made the papers. It made the papers in New York, but not in Texas.
And he was a long way
How
from
this
New York.
Yeah, don't
Uh,
don't come to Texas unless you can drive, you
yeah.
know.
Well, maybe that's enough for today, Mike.
Okay.
We should do this again, eh?
Yeah. I think our next episode I want to mention a comment from one of our
Okay,
you
cool.
know, commenters, and then it's
Uh,
from at the captain, and we'll answer his question on the next episode. Is that
yeah,
okay with you?
that'd be great. Look forward to it. Thanks, Mike.
All right.
See you next time.
See you, Peter. Thanks, brother. It's been a great time.
Thanks, bro.